From what the whole theme of the morning has been, and getting that balance right and getting our nutritional supplements programs in place. I'm not going to go too in depth into the scientific side of things, but just go through what your general requirements of ruminant nutrition are for Northern Australia, and then through a couple of the products and ways that you can simply go about implementing and using your animals to maximise production. A little bit on Olsson's very quickly. We've been around since 1906 and always manufacturing blocks since then. But initially the blocks that we made were ice blocks, and the Olsson's family delivered them all over Sydney. But unfortunately, with the advent of electricity, that put an end to their business, so they had to look at a different opportunity, and that was making a multi-nutrient block in 1948, and it was actually called a calcium molasses block that we still make and distribute throughout Australia now. So we've been around for a long time, and we employ a number of nutritionists, one being Ron Lang, that's probably known worldwide as one of the leading ruminant nutritionists. So to begin with, just to go through what our ruminant nutritional requirements are, as a priority we need to look at getting the balance of the microbes in the gut. So feeding the gut is all we're really doing in a supplementation program. So we need to get ammonia in there, sulphur and phosphorus, but at the same time keep that balance going. And then at certain times of the year getting the protein in. So as the presentation goes on, we'll go on to different ways of and cost-effective ways of getting a protein into your supplementation program. So again, I'll keep talking about the balance in the rumen and the importance of that, because animals are no different than we are. We need that balanced diet to perform to a maximum. Fortunately, ruminants have the capacity to eat feed that we can't, i.e. grasses and so forth. So we, in conjunction, we're a nice mix to work together. And for the supply of protein to the world market, we know that it's going to be an ongoing issue into the future, and we need to, and there's no reason why the North can't also be a leader in that protein to the world market. Ruminant digestion, it just comes back to the gut and fermentation in the rumen and getting that balance right there. So getting the balance of our bacterias, fungi, protozoa and viruses. So all what appear to be the nasty things on the outside can also be the things that we can help maximise production on the inside of that rumen. But to have them a gut performing, it's all about the balance and having these microbes at the right levels. What do the microbes actually do? In a extensive situation, they'll break down the roughage, they'll break down the grasses, the fibre and so forth. And with that, they'll in the gut it'll ferment your feed components, and the bacteria will wash through the gut. The other protozoas and so forth with the biofilms in the rumen just allow a more rapid and better digestion and breaking down what you're putting in there. And the cheapest feed that we can put in there is what's in the paddock. Supplementation, in any supplementation program, it's feeding that most limiting factor. and that most limiting factor is going to vary from paddock to paddock, from mob to mob, as the seasons change, and we need to feed, as the barrel shows there. We'll fix one part and then fix the next limiting factor. So the major deficiencies in the rumen, a lot of the time, is protein, the crude protein, and not being able to access protein in the feeds that are available in the paddock, and allowing the animal to produce there. Sulphur, I'll go into sulphur a little bit more as we go on, but it's one that in a lot of ways we as a primary industry forgot about sulphur for a long time, and just the benefits that it has in the rumen. And of course phosphorus, which is an ongoing issue across Australia, but it'll also, when there's phosphorus deficiencies, we know that it'll reduce your feed intake. So we need to try and get that balance through there again. As a rule, a recommendation for a breeder in the ideal world is if we could get 50 in a supplementation program, get 50 to 60 grams of urea per head per day, and then that initially, but we'll see that increase as the season goes on. So just the changing competition, we'll see there that you're looking at good after the wet, as things have started to dry out somewhat. Pretty good protein, that you'll be on an upward spiral, that 12 up to 14%, depending on what your pasture source is, and then you'll see it dropping away over a period of time as you head towards the wet, until you'll get down to a point where it's not a maintenance level and you are actually falling away. Along with wet season, the most limiting factor in the wet is phosphorus, in most cases being leached, and just or lack of availability in natural pastures. So the recommendation is around that 8 grams of phosphorus per head per day. No doubt a lot of you have sort of seen the symptoms of phosphorus deficiency, right through to peg leg and so forth, in really bad situations, but growth rates within itself. That's a feeding trial where phosphorus was available all year round, not just in the wet. We know traditionally that it's been phosphorus, yes, we'll put phosphorus out in the wet or prior to the wet, and that'll keep us going, and we'll go through there. But what we found when in this particular trial was that we had a 60 kilos annual weight gain against the control when phosphorus was available all year round. An increase in condition score at weaning, and I guess moving forward, an increase of 40% of those first calf heifers cycling and going back in calf sooner, and a slight increase in milk production. So we know that reproductive efficiency is what we're trying to look in our breeding herds, and try and increase that to increase profitability and the health of your herds. Sulphur, we know that sulphur, if you're feeding a high urea supplementation, ideally in our situation blocks, but whether it be a loose lick or not, then in a lot of cases sulphur is the most limiting factor. A lot of northern Australia is sulphur deficient, and if your sulphur is deficient, your dry matter intake is going to be reduced, therefore affecting your productivity. This one here, a bit hard to see, but I've actually got booklets for all of you afterwards. But the Live weight change in lactating cows with high sulphur blocks. So with no supplementation over the period, there was a loss of 5.6 kilos. And in the supplement program, there's the gain of 17.8 kilos. So it is significantly different in the weight gauge as well as in the condition score over the period of time. If you're looking at correcting the sulphur deficiencies in forages, what we've seen is a massive increase in intake of pastures, and I guess the big one, is your tropical grasses and your spear grasses. 175% increase there. So if you can get them to eat more, they're going to utilise what's there, and again your productivity will be increased. And again there showing the effects on supplementation all year round with phosphorus and urea, and I'll go through some of the work that we've done there on all year round supplementation. We've been working on what we're calling a free choice system for a number of years, and we did a lot of work in the Gulf and the Peninsula in Queensland a number of years ago when the fires went through there and just burned out properties completely. There was just absolutely nothing left with it. No doubt you guys go through the similar things at different times, but one particular property, they bought some blocks and they were using blocks which they shouldn't have been as feed because there was nothing there. We always say, look, they're a supplement. Try and help them out a bit. We said, oh, look, we'll give you a couple of pallets of seconds blocks, and those seconds blocks just happen to be sulphur blocks. And they put out the pallet 1.2 tonne with a heap of the other mixed blocks that they put out there, and 400 cows ate 1.2 tonne in 27 hours. And we went, something's interesting here, and they rang us and said this is the case. They put out another lot, 3 days, another 1.2 tonne went. After that, they went in to Georgetown, got another pallet of 1.2 tonne pallet of 12% sulphur blocks, put them out, and for the next 3 months they ate about 50 grams per head per day. And that was when we looked at it and went, well, we're putting out all these other blocks, and yes, they're eating them, but there's obviously a sulphur deficiency there. We had no idea that it was there. The producer never had any idea that it was there. And we started to work it back from there on how we identify it. If we look at different species around the world, this group of macaws, they eat a fruit in South America that gives them a gut ache, effectively. And they eat this every morning, then they take off and head for the clay pans, and they sit there and just chew away on clay to help with that metabolic discomfort. So it's animals knowing what they need to help with that metabolic discomfort. Likewise, monkeys, they eat, in this case we're eating a leaf that contains toxins. They go to where the fires have been, human fires and fire pits and whatnot in Africa, and go and eat charcoal and take that pain in the belly away. We've all seen that plenty of times. Dirty, stinking, rotten carcass, whether it's an old roo or an old beast, and a cow with the head jammed right in there and chewing bones out of it, or whether it be chewing polly or whatever the case is. But they're looking for something, and that metabolic drive is what they're looking for. Wild animals do it as well. We know giraffes do it. A little bit more difficult for giraffes, obviously, to get down there, but they do it. So we sort of looked at all of that and went, okay, ideally we'd like to have one block and be able to put out one block where that will do the lot. But it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. Because we are looking at supplementing a protein, through a urea source, we know that some of our most limiting factors are phosphorus. in different areas. You know, sulphur is a huge issue. So we developed what we call the free choice system to try and address a lot of the deficiencies. Now it's a little bit hard to see, but that's actually a 1 tonne block. So if you can imagine a block about 4 foot wide and about 3 foot high, it's a 48% molasses block. The holes you can see, if you can see it there, down both sides. We put sulphur down one side and we put phosphorus blocks down the other. And you would think you'd put that out with a mob of old breeders and they'd devour the molasses block like a lolly. What they actually did was they pulled out the phosphorus and the sulphur blocks and ate those before they ate down the molasses block. For no other reason than that was what their most limiting factors were. They needed the sulphur, they needed the phosphorus more than they needed the energy or the 10% protein, 10% urea in the molasses block. So we're not recommending that you put out 1 tonne blocks. In certain situations it might work. I don't particularly like them, but that's I guess a little demonstration of cattle and their metabolic drive and the fact that they'll chase what they need. So from that we started to look at putting out phosphorus, putting out our 30% urea blocks into Uraphos and putting out a trace element block, and in a basic free choice system. And it's not one size fits all. As I said, one paddock will be different to the next paddock and the requirements of what you're trying to maximise your production there. Again, sulphur there, that was one of those photos earlier on. That's what they did in about 20, well, as they described it, in about 3 stubbies sitting there watching these cows eat that block. So the huge deficiency there, and not far from it the other blocks were untouched. So as I said earlier, we're looking at trying to supplement protein a lot of the time, and the cheapest protein source is urea. And by having a 30% urea block, we do make a 40 and 50% urea block for a couple of places in the territory that we sort of are doing some more work on, but 30% in the NT Uraphos is what we generally recommend as a dry season block. Just to go through what our blocks actually do in the NT Uraphos slightly differently than some of the others. We include zeolite in there, and the main reason is to improve that rumen microbial activity, get that gut working. It helps with the palatability of urea. Urea is, not a likeable substance for animals to eat as a rule, and it also helps with the efficiency after it gets in the rumen. Zeolite acts like a sponge, I guess. So a sponge, you squeeze the water in and you let water run out, and it runs out slowly rather than just picking it up and just letting a cup of water go. So that slower release of urea actually helps with the safety margin of it as well, so that the urea is held at a more constant level within the rumen, and again that balance. Our blocks are a cold press block, so if you can imagine a normal loose lick, everything's put into a mix, away it goes. Small amount of molasses, I guess, as a binder, and then our blocks are made purely a cold press, so there's 3.5 tonne of pressure that hold those blocks together. So there's no magic ingredient in there, and cement and so forth like there was in days gone by. It's just pure pressure that hold them. Used to be at one stage. But the other reason that we use the cold press blocks is urea, if it's heated over 110 degrees, will convert, or may convert to biuret and triuret. And I guess one of the big things with it is you've probably fed out supplements in the hole around where your lick station is. After the season breaks, you'll get the plants grow to that high and just die. And it's quite often the biuret that's actually killed the plant life there afterwards. So, and it moves through the system a lot quicker than we'd like it to. Phosphorus, we make an 8% super phos block, or is our wet season block. We're actually just working on bringing out a 12% block now. It's got a small amount of bypass protein in there, purely for palatability more than anything else. Again, it's a cold pressed block. And we know that it does improve fertility, help with your production, and we recommend that in a free choice system. Again, high sulphur, we believe that in an all-round system, or you need to have that availability of sulphur there. And if some of you are using loose lick, we also have a number of properties now that are putting sulphur out in conjunction with the loose lick that they're using. Because sulphur is not a palatable product, it's difficult to get enough sulphur into a lot of those products. And by having a sulphur product there, you're just adding to your supplementation program. Finally, we sort of get asked what the loose lick versus blocks, whether or not we can get them to eat enough, or whether they're going to eat too much of a supplementation. That one trial there, we had one of our competitions 30% urea blocks. They, in this case, were eating up to, breeders were eating up to 700 grams per head per day. We included sulphur and our NT Urifos block, and what it did, it reduced the consumption overall, and we continued that on over a 12-month basis. And what we found, and we're finding it more and more, is by having that multiple number of blocks available, is that before we can visually see that the season's changed, they've changed from one block to another. So they might go off the high protein block and onto the phosphorus block as the season changes, or their sulphur requirements as your plant life has changed slightly. So they'll self-medicate to a certain extent. Now, as I said, when I first started with Olsson's, I thought, they said, this is a great thing, we'll get people to put out 4 different blocks. I thought, how easy is this going to be? We'll just sell heaps of 4 blocks instead of 1. But what we actually do is we put together what we call free choice pallets, so that when you're going out, you can have one there that you might have 3 30% urea blocks, and a couple of phosphorus blocks, and a trace element block, and a sulphur block. So we work with you to try and break that down. And even if some of you are going, well, that's what the managers organise, who what we have to use. Part of the free choice system is manipulating it, and the feedback that you can provide from being out there in the paddock and seeing what they're using at any particular time. It does make life easier by getting them coming through like that. But the idea is to maximise the production and just keep that rumen functioning the best way that you possibly can. As I said, I've got some brochures over there that go through all of the presentation there. That's about it for me. If there's any questions, I'll be here all weekend. I thought you'd have a question, Ken. Come on. No. All right, thank you very much, and enjoy your weekend.